Are you tired of coming back from gold prospecting trips with basically diddly squat to show for it, or close to diddly squat? I'll give you 6 of my battle-tested tips that I've used myself to significantly increase your chances of finding gold the next time you go metal detecting and gold prospecting in Western Australia. Stay tuned. There's nothing more frustrating than coming back from a gold prospecting trip with nothing to show for it, or close to nothing to show for it. So let's dive straight in and I'll show you my 6 tips that I use for finding more gold. Well, let's put it this way, increasing my probabilities of finding gold the time I go out there. So here's the first tip. We want to jump straight in, but let me maybe try to show you how these things are related together. I've got my chain around my neck to demonstrate the point. These last 6 links in the chain are like these last 6 tips that I'm going to show you. Each one depends on the other to work. If you don't do any of these individual links, like you don't do the last one, don't do the first one, don't do the second one, your chances basically of finding gold are heading south at a great rate. Now, of these 6 links here, basically most people seem to concentrate on the second one and forget the first one, and maybe occasionally look at the other ones. So really the emphasis goes on this one over here. So what is the 6 links? So the first one, and I'll work from top to bottom. The first link is research. You've got to spend an incredible amount of time looking for research on the ground that you want to prospect. You've got to know that the ground is good. So people say, oh, how do I find out about what ground I can go on? Go and ask the mines department. They can basically tell you what ground you can go on, but what you're going to find out what ground is you're allowed on, and then really what you need to do is what ground should you go on, and then the research will help you find out what ground you must go on, and that's when you're going to find the gold. So the research, I did a previous video about simple steps for finding gold. Have a look at that if you haven't seen it. I'll provide a link down the bottom. Using Geoview, using 10graph, find the places where you can go. Look for the big long structures, look for the past company reports, look for the soil geochemistry, look at the geology, understand how the quartz is carrying the veins. I've got a video about that as well, link down the bottom. And so find out where those indicators are. Find the promising ground. Then have a look to see if you can find some old workings. Is there old workings around there? Is there mining company reports? Is there drill results? Can you put that together? Put it together in a line and maybe extrapolate along strike. There's a good chance you'll find prospective ground. All the stuff is basically increasing your probability of finding success. So I've got another video coming where we talk about trying to find long lost gold sites that were discovered by the old timers and then basically left because something better was found, and almost no one has been back to those grounds again, and there's quite a few of them around, and I'll show you a technique to find that. There's a subsequent video coming up. So do the research, hammer the ground, hammer the research, and the books and the maps and the apps and the applications and the websites. Look at them all. Do as much as you can. You should be spending the vast majority of your time and prepping for a trip, figuring out exactly what bit of ground you want to go to. No point knowing that you're going to lease XYZ. You need to know where on that lease exactly that you're going to park the car, and that's when you know when you're on a better spot. Okay, hang tight for the second spot. Tip number 2 is one, as I said before, is where people spend most of their time, and that's basically equipment. People fuss over about the latest metal detector. Should it be model A, model B, this is better than that, whatever like that. So really, yeah, equipment is incredibly important, don't get me wrong, and metal detectors are very expensive bits of gear. You're going to be spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to buy a good quality metal detector. If you see something advertised down at the local corner electric shop for 150 bucks, you know, it ain't gonna find anything. It'd be like you found anything on the beach. So we need to find a good metal detector. So first thing to finding a good metal detector is please, please, please don't go out there and buy a metal detector. I know this is many metal detector shops we're going to say, you know, no, you got to buy one, go buy. No, stop, whoa, keep your pants on and don't buy a metal detector. Okay, what I'm suggesting to you do is for the next couple of trips, and this is for people that are obviously don't have a detector yet and beginners, is hire a bunch of different detectors in your approximate budget range to find out which one best suits you. Some are super easy to use, some are more complicated to use. Some are heavy, some are light. You've got to find the one that resonates with you. So hire them. They're not expensive. You can hire them every weekend for multiple years and still be cheaper than buying a metal detector. So find out which one of the metal detectors resonates with you. Try a whole bunch of different brands, different models, whatever you can get your hands on. But please, please, please do not rush out and buy a metal detector. Test them out first, find out what you need. Then once you do decide what you need to buy the most metal detector you can get for your budget. Now there's no real point in fussing about the most expensive, best metal detector on the market if your budget doesn't go to it, or no hope of getting anywhere near it. But buy the best that your budget can reach to. Now, the top of the line metal detectors round about at the moment, at the time of making this video, $8,000 to $10,000. That's a chunk of money for most people. So don't rush out and spend $10,000, and you may find a slightly different metal detector is better for you, or you spend $2,000 and I wish you'd spent more money, another $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, or you could even reach the 10. I'm not saying which one's better because I'll start a religious war on metal detectors, but test, then buy. So what in your gear, the next better thing to become useful with the gear is you've got to get used to the settings. Know which one of the settings works for you, and you got your ear tuned in to those settings. So how do you do this? Obviously by use. So what I would suggest doing is, once you've got a detector that you're happy with or you're still experimenting with, is to go outside of the metro area, get out of the area that's most affected by EMI, electromagnetic interference. That's power lines, mobile phone towers, cars, you name it. Get away from this as far as possible. And then actually in the ground, bury a variety of targets. If you can get your hands on some gold nuggets, preferably small ones, half grammers, something like that, or even smaller, put them in a plastic pill bottle or something like that, and bury them in the ground. Bury a bullet, bury it, small fishing weights, a washer, pieces of tin, some crunched up tin foil, different depths and different sizes, and then play with the detector and the settings over those. Get your ear tuned into what things sound like. Get a realistic expectation of what a target sounds like. Most times, most targets are pretty subtle, and you really have to be tuned in to listen to them. They're not going to be like going over the top of a 44-gallon drum, which just screams in your ear. Highly possible, highly unlikely, but experiment with the detector. So get familiar with the settings. If you don't know about the settings, YouTube can be your friend. If you're still struggling with that, go down to your dealer. They'll be more than happy to tell you the various settings. And the last thing with equipment is you've got to be confident in your gear. If you're not confident in your gear, then it's like fishing. You know, if you're confident that this fishing lure will catch your fish, you'll push it a bit harder. If you're confident this rod will actually get you the distance to get the lure out there, you'll push it a bit harder and you'll get the spot. And the confident angler gets the fish. The confident prospector generally gets the gold. So if you're double guessing your machine, thinking that it won't pick up anything, or every signal coming is a piece of junk, guess what? Your chances of finding anything are pretty well close to diddly squat. So you're not going to handle the thing properly, you're going to hold it too high in the air, you're not going to swing the correct speed, it's just not going to work nice. So get familiarization with your gear, and that is the big one. Tip number 3 coming up. So I just wanted to jump in with it, change the topic just a little bit here. Thanks to all those who bought me a coffee. There's a link down the bottom for a buy me a coffee link. It really gives me a vote of confidence that I'm on the right track with the content I'm providing. So every time that every time I put up a video, I'll randomly choose a name of someone that's bought me a coffee and I'll put it up on the screen. So this time I'd like to thank James G for buying me a coffee. It's much appreciated. And don't be shy, the link's down below. Okay, tip number 3 is you've arrived at the spot. You've done the research, you've got the gear, you've got the camping gear, you've got the vehicle, blah, 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 blah. You're ready to hit the ground. So you've just jumped out the vehicle, added likely what you think is the spot you've marked on the map. Now what? Well, the next key is read the ground. Okay, before you start swinging the metal detector like a lunatic, read the ground. Figure out where the slope of the ground is. If there's old workings, then figure out where the old workings are in respect to the slope of the ground. What I'm saying by that is, if you're standing here and the hill rises away from you and there's old workings at the top of the hill, then a good chance it means long before the prospectors got the early prospectors got here to start those old workings, gold has been shedding off that load and running down the hill. So you look at that hill and try to figure out where the gold may have stopped. And the gold's not going to come bouncing down the hill like you see those cartoon big boulders rolling down the hill. WA hills are pretty gentle, you know, if we can call them hills, in all honesty. So things move slowly and are generally only moving because of water. So use your eyes and figure out where the water runs. Have a walk around. Everywhere in the bush there's signs of where the last flood was. And I mean a flood means like a centimetre or 2 centimetres of water was running. There's sticks, there's leaves, there's furrows cut in the ground. All that will tell you which direction the water ran in. Now, as you know from watching, as I'm assuming you do, watching a lot of other gold prospectors, especially the ones over east and in the US and Canada where they do the placer mining, gold collects in the bottom of creeks. So if you can see a bit of a depression, a bit of a gully running down the side of the hill, now there's good chance there's nothing in that creek now. It is bone dry. But at one time there was water in it, and the water may have been running down that water course for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And there's a good chance that if there's gold anywhere near that area, it's going to be in that water course. But of course, you're going to get a lot more junk in there as well. You're going to get some hot rocks, you're going to get bits of tin and all sorts of other rubbish inside there. But that's where the gold usually ends up collecting, in the water courses. So don't disregard them. Give them a scan, work along them, and also keep an eye open for the old water courses, because the old timers, good chance, would have done some dry blowing along the edges because the soil profile was a bit deeper. The other thing with knowing the lay of the land is look at the vegetation. The vegetation will tell you, it's basically just big arrows on the ground telling you what's happening. So if you're looking at the vegetation and it's all scrubby, short, stumpy bush, and then there's a line of trees, and then you're back into scrubby bush again, it's telling you something. Anyone guess what I'm telling you? It's telling you trees grow in deep soil, shrubby, stunted bushes grow in shallow soils. So what it is saying was the soil was shallow, then got deep, and came shallow again. Now, why would the soil suddenly get deep there? It's a good chance it's an old fault zone that runs through there. And fault zones that have reached the surface today, the rocks are broken up, they're more amenable to weathering, they break down into clays, and generally the fault zone is what fills up with rainwater and groundwater. And so the trees love to get their roots into the groundwater. So the bigger the trees, the more water they need, there's something there. Now, if you just walk into a whole plain of trees, that's not telling you much. But you're looking for the changes in vegetation. Suddenly you go from tall trees, short bushes, tall trees again, short bushes. It's telling you that the geology is changing at those points. So the rule of thumb to remember is plants only grow in certain types of soils. Soils are only made from certain types of rocks. So therefore you can join the thing and say certain types of plants generally only grow on certain types of geology. And once you figure that out, the vegetation can become your best friend for telling you where stuff is. So read the vegetation. As I said before, check out the old workings. You want to look around, see what they were doing. Were they chasing underground lodes? Were they chasing a surface gold with some dry blowing? Have a look around, see what it is. So that's the next key. That was the key for that, the whole tip. Read the ground and let the ground tell you what's happening around there. Tip number 4 is time on ground equals confidence. So you've got to spend time when you're out there. Don't expect a metal detect for an hour a day and come back with bucket loads of gold. You're going to have to put the time in. And as that great sage from the Aussie gold hunters, Shane, would say, Rusty, the gold doesn't find itself. You have to get out there, you have to swing the coil, and if you pass over the gold, the metal detector will find it. But if you're walking right next to it, it's not going to jump out the ground, it's not going to come and see you, it's not going to come and visit you in the camp. You've actually got to spend time. And the more time you're out there detecting, the more confidence you will get. What I would suggest people doing, especially the newcomers, is put a little bit of gold, a small piece. You can either buy it off someone else if you don't have any, or some gold you found previously, a tiny piece like say half gram or 0.1, 0.2 of a gram. Put it in a tiny glass vial, and as you've been metal detecting for a while and you haven't even detected a junk signal, throw the vial on the ground and pass the detector over. Now, there's almost certainly nothing's gone wrong with your metal detector, but again it gives you that boost of confidence that if I did pass over gold, I would find it, and it just happens to be no gold at that location. So you can bend down, pick it up. I've seen people attach them to a piece of string, pick it up, put it in their pocket and continue on. But it just builds that confidence, and you've got to spend the time out there. As many hours as you can swinging that detector. Slow and steady is the way it goes, and you will find gold. Tip number 5. Record your observations when you're out there. Now make sure you get yourself an app that has GPS enabled recording on it, like drop a pin or something like that. So as you walk around and you see something of interest, it may not be gold at that particular spot, but it could be workings, it could be partially hidden dry blow heaps, it could be old scrapings, it could be an old miner's camp with the tin punched out that they were using for building a dry blower. Drop a pin on the map, 1 or 2 words, maybe a sentence of description, and keep it in the app. Whenever you find a nugget, drop a pin, record the location, best guess on what you think is this, 0.1, 0.2, 5 grams, whatever it is, write it in this location. The idea being that when you get back to the camp, and maybe even later, when you get back home, you can sit down and go through this data, looking at it and say, hold on a second, that old miners camp here is just to the south of these things that I thought looked like drove lying heaps, and they're not far from these workings. So maybe, and they line up with some trees, maybe you can start to extrapolate a possible ore zone. If you can do that well out in the field, excellent. But try it, but record. If you don't record and rely on memory, you're basically going to forget. Because after a couple of hours out there, or even a couple of days, and you come back 2 weeks later, you've forgotten just about 80% of everything you saw. So record it, record it, record it. And if you see faults in the ground, like some sheared up rock sticking out of it, pull out your compass, stick it on the side of it, and measure the strike of the fault. Put all that information down. You never know what's going to aid you in finding that next bonanza spot. So record everything. So the sixth and final point is test all your gear before you go out in the bush. Now, this may sound like an idiot's tip, but I've been burnt enough times to know this is a key one for me. So before you go through your gear, find all your cables, make sure you've got spare parts. I use a set of headphones. Make sure you've got a spare set, because what happens if you pull the cable out? And I use a GPX 5000. It doesn't have an external speaker on it, so if that headphones is ruined, can't really use the metal detector. Make sure that you've got your pick, you've got your boots, you've got the usual sort of bits and bobs that go with it, all the cables, because there's nothing worse than getting out there and finding that you've left a scoop behind, or you've left your favorite coil behind, or you left the cable that joins this part to that part, or that's even worse, you've left the charger behind. And I've done that once before. So check it out, test out every gear, lay it all out, run through it, almost dress the part at home, put on your harness, put on your belt, get the pick out, attach the things together, make sure everything's powered up, everything charges, everything works, there's no dodginess in the cables, all the things look good, you've got enough spares, so if anything breaks, you can keep going on. Because there's nothing worse than having to ride a prospecting trip off because you broke a $2 piece of plastic. So test your gear and do a dry run beforehand. I really hope that you got something out of this, and if you did and you liked what the content I'm providing, I would love it if you give us a thumbs up and maybe hit the subscribe button, and I'll give you some more information in the future. Thanks guys.